Hello, Richard from BudgetKeyboardist.com. My home studio is a spare bedroom in my house, and it has to be multifunctional. So I write music, I record, mix, master, and I also do gigs as a one-man band. So this room has to be set up to do all three. Today, I'm going to give you a tour of my budget gear. Let's get started. Microphones. I'm going to go through my studio in the order of signal flow from the microphone to the speaker. So let's start with my budget mic collection. My number one microphone, which I've used to record vocals since 2004, is a Rode NT1A. This mic is still in production and it still sounds fantastic after all these years. It was a game changer when it came out. Next we have the AKG 214. And I bought this because I thought it would sound better on my voice than the Rode NT1A, and it did, but it also has kind of like this harsh high end. So I use it sometimes on vocals and on acoustic guitar and for videos, but honestly, I still prefer the Rode mic. My third microphone is the AKG C1000. Now, this mic works great on acoustic guitar, and with an adapter, it's a passable live mic for vocals. Up next is my EV ND767A. That's a mouthful. It was a great dynamic vocal microphone that EV used to make. They replaced it with the crappy ND76, which everybody agreed doesn't sound as good as this. So why? The mic body was made out of plastic and it totally disintegrated, so you can't really see, but it's here. Here's my Shure SM7B. Now, I don't have a cloud lifter, which I'm told really brings this mic to life. I use it for voiceovers, which I sometimes do for work and for YouTube. Speaking of Shure, I also have a Shure SM57. So obviously I use this to record guitar amps, and it's also my backup mic when I do live gigs. It's cheap, it sounds good, it's built like a tank. Every studio should have a 57. And then last but not least, there's my wireless Comica Boom XD condenser wireless lapel mic. That's a mouthful. It sounds okay, not great, but it's wireless. My other mics sound better, but I mean, sometimes you gotta go wireless. Right now, I'm not. I'm using this. I wish I had a boom mic for my YouTube channel instead of using this, so maybe that'll be one of my next purchases, maybe 2024. Recording interfaces. I have several interfaces, but the best is the Universal Audio Apollo Solo. If you're not familiar with it, it's got its own CPU and it can host recording plugins. So basically that means you can record vocals and have compression and reverb in your headphones, but record the dry signal. And you can't do that with a cheap box. You can do it with less than 1 millisecond of latency. So the plugins that come with this thing sound amazing, and it comes with a bunch of different preamp plugins, and I love the thing. It's great. But it does require Thunderbolt 3. Which rules out older computers. When I want to record using like one of my really old Mac laptops, I reach for the Scarlett 2i2. It sounds great, it runs on USB, and they're relatively inexpensive. And I recorded my first 4 albums with it, so good enough. When I have to record more than like 2 things at once, I reach for my Tascam US 16x8. It can record up to 16 channels at a time, and I almost never use it. But when I need it, I have it. It's inexpensive, it sounds good. Not great, but I mean, certainly good enough. Mixers. For monitoring, I have a Yamaha MG12XU. I have actually recorded vocals through it, but mostly I use it to monitor things, and everything's plugged into it. It has 12 channels, it's a good sounding analog mixer, and quite frankly, I like the faders on it, especially for live use. Just faders easier than knobs. I also have 2 smaller Alesis mixers that I use as like Swiss Army knives, but I'm not gonna go into that. They're little ones. I'm going to call my Behringer X-Touch a mixer because to me it is. It's got faders on it. It works like an automated mixer. It's got transport buttons on it. It works great with Logic Pro and every other DAW, and I like it a lot. And you might say, ugh, How could you insert a Behringer product into your audio chain? Well, the answer is it's not in my audio chain. It's strictly a control surface. If it died, I could mix fine without it, but it's really handy to have automated faders like when you're doing mixing and to have everything right out in front of you. I really like it a lot. Computers. My main recording computer is a base model M1 Mac Mini, which I bought refurbished for $429. I was a little worried that 8 gig of RAM wouldn't be enough for my needs, but it definitely is. If I were using big orchestral libraries, I'd probably consider like building a PC with a crazy amount of RAM, but I'm not. And honestly, I prefer Logic Pro as my DAW. It's connected to a 27-inch 4K Dell monitor that I bought a few years ago for $300, which I don't like. It's not very color accurate, and one day I'm going to buy something better, but for now it's good enough. I use an Apple wireless keyboard and a Magic trackpad with my Mac Mini. I'm definitely a trackpad guy over mouse. My secondary computer, which is what I use for everything else, this guy here, is a 2018 MacBook Pro. It's got a 6-core i7, 512 gig SSD drive, 16 gig of RAM, and I used it to record my last album, Attack of the 80s Synths. It's great, but it choked on my Cherry Audio Mercury 6 plugin, and I really like that plugin. On the M1 Mac Mini, that plugin runs just fine, as does everything else. I also have a 2015 MacBook Pro, which used to belong to my daughter, but it has a dead battery, and you can't easily replace those. I mean, if you plug it in, it works fine, but we really don't use it. It's like an emergency backup. And then I've got 2 old white MacBooks from 2008 and 2009 running Intel Core 2 Duo processors. I use the 2009 to burn audio CDs and sometimes for 2-track recording. And I also have Reason 5 running on it, as well as an older version of Logic Pro. I don't use the 2008, but it still works. So we'll get to the software in a bit. But first, let's finish talking about the recording chain, shall we? Monitoring. So my main studio monitors are a pair, pointing pretty good, pair of Kali LP8 V2 powered studio monitors. They're 120 watts each, bi-amped, which is more than enough power for this bedroom. 8-inch woofers can go down to 37 hertz, and they have front-facing ports, so they can go up against the wall. They sound really good, and at $500 a pair, they're very, very reasonably priced for how good they sound. I also sometimes reference mixes on my Live PA, which is a pair of EV-ZLX 12P speakers. Those are like 1,000 watts each. That's what I gig with, but the live rig is another video. And I still have my original Alesis Monitor 1 speakers, which I mixed my first 5 albums on, and I can power them with a Mackie rack mount power amps. It's like I've got backups for everything. I keep all the old stuff. For headphones, I got a pair of Shure SE215 in-ear monitors, which are cheap, but I like the sound of them a lot. And I also have a pair of AKG K240 over-the-ear headphones, which I use for recording vocals. Guitars and basses, right? I'm not going to go through my guitar and bass collection. We'd be here all day. I think I have around like 18 guitars, 3 basses, mandolin, and a banjo. The banjo's banished to the corner of the room, just so you know. So don't worry about that. Other stuff. I also have a homemade vocal booth, which can be assembled and disassembled, and it's made out of PVC pipe and packing blankets. That works really well if you want to learn more about it. It's on budgetguitarist.com YouTube channel, link in the description. I have a few mic stands like this one. Obviously, I got a lot of cables, and my mixing desk is an old office furniture desk that I clamped some boards onto, as you can see. It is budget keyboardist. I do want to get or build like a new desk to put my gear on, but honestly, the current setup works just fine. Keyboards. So now let's have a look at my massive keyboard collection of 3 keyboards. I mean, I have dozens of software synths, but we're going to talk about the actual keyboards first. Casio CDP-100. It's in storage right now. It has a decent piano sound, it's got a decent Rhodes sound, and I gigged with it for like a decade, maybe more. The lowest 6 keys stopped working on it, and that's what gave me an excuse to buy the next keyboard I'm going to talk about. Yamaha MX88. So I got this a couple of years ago, and I like it a lot. It sounds great. It's got 88 weighted keys. I gig with it. I used it on my most recent album. And for the money, I thought it was the best idea. And if I have to do piano, Rhodes, DX7 piano, CP80, this is my choice. The sounds in this are better than any of my software stuff. Now, my Arturia Keylab Essentials 49, which is behind me here, that's connected to my Mac Mini, and that is mostly what I record synths with. I mean, I can also record synths with this, but it's nice to have the keyboard like right in front of the computer screen. It just makes it easier. Software. Finally, we get to software. Okay, so for my main DAW, I'm running Logic Pro 10.8, which I think just came out. I've been running Logic since 2004. I also use Ableton Live as my main DAW for live gigs with my laptop because it's really great for live playback of tracks and automation. And I also use MainStage Live for live gigs. I have GarageBand, I've got Reaper, I've got Cubase on my computer, but mostly I just like play around with them. I mean, they're all great, but I'm most comfortable with Logic Pro, so that's what I run. On my older Macs, I run an older version of Logic Pro as well as Reason 5, which is, to me, kind of still fun to play with. In terms of software synths, I use a lot of the plugins in Logic Pro, the Sampler, Alchemy, Mellotron, and RetroSynth. Some of the other stuff sometime. In addition to Logic, I'm a big fan of Dext, which is a free DX7 plugin, and I've got a ton of patches for that thing. And as I mentioned earlier, I also love the Mercury 6 plugin from Cherry Audio. It sounds massive. I recently got the Arturia V9 collection, and I'm going to be exploring that thing for like the next several years. It's a massive collection of almost every classic synth and keyboard you could imagine. Fairlight, Synclavier, Prophet 5, etc. Sounds great, well worth the money. There's a Mini Moog in there too. I'll do a different video about that. It's amazing. So between Logic Pro, handful of third-party plugins, and V9 collection, I've got every keyboard that I ever wanted, with one exception, the ARP Quadra. But you know what? Cherry Audio makes a plugin for that. So I'm going to pick that up sometime in 2024. I probably forgot a bunch of stuff, but anyway, thank you very much for watching. I will see you some future Friday at 5.